I've always believed there were two types of fear, the reasonable kind and the ridiculous kind. Reasonable fear is the kind you feel when someone breaks into your house, or when you're nearly in a car accident, or when you hear something big moving in the woods at night. Ridiculous fear is what you feel when you're alone in a dark room and your mind invents a shadow in the corner, or when you're a kid and think a monster lives under your bed. I lived my whole life believing ridiculous fear didn't apply to me. I thought I'd outgrown it before I even hit high school, but that was before I moved into my great-aunt Evelyn's house, before footsteps began echoing in the hallway at night, before I learned she hadn't been losing her mind the way everyone claimed, before I realized she'd been trying to warn us. Evelyn had lived alone for years before she died. My family didn't visit her much. People said she'd become difficult, hypersensitive, paranoid. Neighbors described her walking outside at strange hours, staring into the woods as if she expected something to emerge from the trees. And then one morning, she was found dead in her bed. No signs of struggle, no injuries, no explanation. They called it natural causes, but nobody ever specified what natural meant. When the house was passed down to me, I figured I might as well use it. Save some money, fix it up, sell it, whatever. I wasn't expecting much more than dust, creaky floors, and outdated wallpaper. What I found instead was a house that felt wrong. There was a heaviness inside it, like the air had been sitting still for decades. Every window looked out toward the woods, and the branches outside pressed against the glass like long, thin fingers. The walls seemed too quiet, too hollow, like they were waiting to absorb a sound that never came. It didn't take long before I found the notebook. It was hidden behind an old dresser in the upstairs hallway, wedged so tightly it took me nearly 10 minutes to pry it out. The cover was torn, the edges curled with water damage, and several pages inside were smudged with what looked like old dirt or dried tears. Most of the writing was frantic and uneven, like Evelyn had scribbled while her hands shook violently. But one page stood out because it wasn't chaotic. It was clear, deliberate, repeated over and over like a mantra. She learned to walk backward. Line after line, perfectly spaced, dozens of times, almost like that sentence had obsessed her or terrified her. I remember sitting on the floor, flipping that page over and over, trying to understand it. I even laughed a little, thinking maybe it was some kind of metaphor or dementia-induced repetition. But when night fell, when I lay in my new bedroom surrounded by boxes, that sentence began to repeat in my head again. She learned to walk backward. She learned to walk backward. She learned to walk backward. At some point past midnight, my eyes were still wide open. I couldn't sleep. The house felt too quiet, and the woods outside seemed too loud, even though I couldn't hear anything specific. Then it happened. A step. Not a creak, not a shifting board. A step. Slow, heavy, real. My heart froze so suddenly I almost gasped. I sat straight up in bed. Another step followed. But something about it was off. The rhythm was all wrong. I'd walked on wooden floors my whole life, heels first, then toes. That's how people move. But this step was reversed. Toe first, then heel. Backward. Completely backward. I didn't even breathe. The steps came again, one after another, slow and dragging, like someone was carefully placing their feet in reverse, walking away instead of towards something. I whispered, barely making a sound. "Hello?" My voice felt too loud, like it didn't belong in that moment. No one responded, but the steps stopped, right outside my bedroom door. I stared at the door handle like it might twist at any second. My mind screamed at me to do something, to run, to hide, to shout for help, but my body didn't respond. I felt rooted to the mattress. The silence stretched so long it felt like hours. Then something brushed against the wall. The soft scrape of skin or cotton pressing lightly against wood. Slow. Intentional. Then a quiet exhale. Not mine. The temperature in the room dropped so suddenly I saw my own breath. My heartbeat thundered in my ears so loudly I barely heard the next sound. A whisper. Broken. Distorted. Like someone had learned speech by listening to recordings played backwards. You found. You. The syllables came out in the wrong order, each one reversed like a tape playing from end to beginning. I pressed myself against the headboard. It wasn't human. It couldn't be human. The thing outside my door tapped twice. 2 soft, deliberate knocks, directly at head height. That finally broke whatever paralysis held me. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands, turned on the flashlight, and pointed it at the door. The light didn't make me feel safer. It made the shadows deeper. I didn't sleep after that. At dawn, I drove straight into town and bought security cameras. 4 of them. I set one in the hallway, one in the living room, one outside facing the woods, and one aimed at the front door. If something was in the house, I'd catch it. That night, I sat on my bed with the live feed open on my phone. Every muscle in my body was tense. Every little sound made me flinch. Hours passed. 1 a.m. 2 a.m. 2:30 a.m. Nothing.
I started to think maybe I'd imagined everything. Maybe it was exhaustion, stress, the weirdness of moving into a dead woman's house. Then, at 2:47 a.m., everything changed. The footsteps returned. Slow, dragging, toe first, heel after. A reversed rhythm echoing down the hallway. I opened the hallway camera. The image was perfectly clear. Empty. Completely empty. But the footsteps grew louder, like they were moving closer to my bedroom door. My blood turned cold. I turned up the phone volume. Silence. The camera's microphone wasn't picking up anything, but I heard every step perfectly. In the room, in the hallway, outside my door. A horrible realization hit me. Whatever was walking, only I could hear it. My breath caught in my throat. The feed glitched, just for half a second, but when the picture stabilized again, someone was standing in the hallway. Not someone, something. Its body was tall and impossibly thin, like its bones were stretched too far. Its neck craned toward my bedroom door. Its torso faced forward, but its feet, long, pale, twisted, pointed the opposite direction. Backward. Completely backward. It wasn't moving, just standing there, frozen. I leaned closer, heart pounding so violently I felt it in my throat. The thing's head twitched, jerked once, then slowly, painfully slowly, it began to turn. Not forward, not sideways. It rotated backward, as if the spine wasn't built correctly, bending in a complete unnatural arc until its face, if you could call it that, pointed directly at the camera. The shape of its face was wrong, too long, too smooth. No features except for two hollow slits where eyes should have been. The feed flickered. Its head snapped fully toward me. And then, one step, a backward step, right outside my door. I dropped the phone. The moment it hit the floor, the footsteps stopped. Everything went silent. I didn't dare move for the rest of the night. When morning finally broke, I opened the bedroom door as slowly as possible. The hallway was empty. The camera still hung from the wall, pointed directly at the space where the creature had stood. But the recording from last night was gone. Not corrupted, not blank. Gone. Deleted, erased, like it had never existed at all. The only trace was the dirt, a long, thin trail of dark soil, almost like footprints, except there were no prints, just smeared lines leading from the far end of the hallway straight to my bedroom door, and then stopping perfectly, directly in front of where I had stood in the video. I followed the trail backwards all the way to the staircase, then to the back door. The smear continued outside, across the wooden porch, into the yard. Then into the trees, straight into the dark woods. A cold breeze passed between the branches, carrying a faint movement. Toe first, then heel, backward. I turned and ran inside, slamming the door behind me. Something was out there. Something that moved wrong. Something that learned how to walk backward. And last night, it found me. The storm rolled in faster than I expected. Back at the cabin, the wind rattled the wooden frame and scraped branches against the roof as if something was trying to claw its way inside. I kept the old flip phone I'd found in the shed on the table, staring at it like it was a venomous thing that might come to life. No part of me wanted to touch it again, and yet I kept glancing at it every few seconds, waiting for the screen to light up on its own, waiting for the boy's voice, waiting for that name to appear again. It didn't. Not yet. But the silence wasn't comforting. It felt like the moment before something steps into the room but hasn't announced itself. The storm worsened. The lights flickered, humming like they were straining to stay alive, and I found myself pacing the cabin, unable to sit still. That voice, the boy's voice, still rang in my ears. The static, the whimpering, the soft pleading, the way he kept saying my name, even though I'd never met him, even though, supposedly, he died decades ago. I tried to convince myself the story was just folklore, something locals exaggerated to scare tourists, but the sheriff had looked at me like he'd seen a ghost walk in. The clerk at the gas station had stopped talking the moment I mentioned the lake, and on the way back, I noticed something even worse. The roads had no other tire tracks. I had left them earlier, but when I returned, the thin layer of mud covering the gravel road had only my pattern. Either no one used the road in hours, or something had erased any sign of others. That idea followed me around the cabin like a shadow I couldn't shake. I checked the windows. Locked. Curtains drawn. The door too. Nothing should be able to get inside. The cabin felt sturdy, though old. but the wind kept making it shift and creak like fingers dragging along the exterior walls. Once, a loud thud made me flinch so hard I dropped the flashlight I was carrying. I walked toward the sound, slowly, letting the beam trace the floorboards in front of me. The cabin's front windows were fogged from the temperature drop. When I wiped the glass with the sleeve of my jacket, something flickered at the edge of my vision. A pale shape by the lake, a faint movement, a figure. I blinked. Gone. I felt ridiculous for letting fear get to me like this, but I couldn't shake the cold sweep through my stomach. I stepped away from the window, my breath shaking. The flip phone beeped. Not a call, not a ringtone, a single mechanical chirp, like a notification from a device that should have been dead years ago. The screen glowed. A text message appeared, blocky and pixelated. "Hello. Please, I'm cold." My mouth dried. I didn't touch the phone, but the message sat there, faint blue light illuminating the table in the dim cabin. Another message popped up before I could think. "You can hear me, right?" Before I realized what I was doing, I reached out and slowly flipped the phone open. The hinge squeaked. The home screen flickered again, distorting into static and lines before the message page returned. I didn't type anything. I didn't press any buttons. The phone wasn't connected to any network. There was no SIM card, no reason it should be receiving anything from anywhere. And yet another message rolled in. "I remember you. You said you'd help me. You promised." I stepped back, heat rising in my chest. "I never promised anything," I whispered, even though the device couldn't hear me. The phone buzzed again, violently this time, like something inside it was shaking to escape. "Come back. Please. 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 Please." Each word arrived as a separate message, stacking endlessly down the screen. I snapped the phone shut and shoved it inside a drawer. The buzzing didn't stop. The wood rattled. The sound vibrated through the cabin floor. I covered my ears, pacing again, trying to breathe. My pulse throbbed in my throat.
I needed to get out, to go back to town. I didn't care about the refund, the storm, or the mud. I just needed to be anywhere but here. I threw on my jacket and grabbed the keys. When I stepped onto the porch, cold rain slapped my face, soaking into my hair instantly. Wind roared between the trees, bending the pines so far I thought they might snap. The sky was nearly pitch black despite being early evening. I reached the car, hands trembling so badly the key almost slipped through my fingers. I jammed it into the lock and wrenched it open. Then I froze. There were small, wet footprints leading around the car. Not animal prints, not boots. Bare feet. A child's. Tiny. Perfectly shaped. Fresh. They circled the car, looping twice, then trailed toward the trees where the darkness swallowed them. I swallowed hard, feeling a tight, electric sensation crawl up my spine. The footprints weren't there earlier. I was sure of it. The rain was heavy enough to wash them away quickly. That meant they were recent, maybe minutes old, maybe seconds. Lightning cracked across the sky, turning the forest white for an instant. In that flash, I saw him. A child standing between two trees, his skin pale, almost glowing, dripping wet. His clothes clung to him, torn and muddy. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He stared straight at me. I bolted into the car and slammed the door shut. My breath fogged the windshield as I turned the key in the ignition. It didn't start. I tried again. Nothing. Just a choking click.
The engine refused to turn over. I cursed, slapping the steering wheel hard enough to sting my palm. I tried again and again, each time feeling the panic twist tighter. On the 5th try, something happened. The radio, despite the car being half dead, crackled on, hissing with static. I froze. From the static, buried under layers of distortion, came a voice. A boy's voice. "You left me." I hit the radio's power button repeatedly, but it stayed on, the knob turning on its own. The static rose and fell, the voice weaving through it like it was underwater. "You said you would help me." My throat burned. "I don't know who you are," I whispered. But the voice kept going, louder and clearer, like it was leaning close to the speaker. Elaine came back for me. She said she would. She promised. She took me from the cabin. She brought me to the lake. She said she'd keep me safe. The name echoed in my head. Elaine. The motel clerk. The one who'd given me the keys to the cabin. The one who'd looked at me strangely when I told her where I was staying. The voice on the radio cracked into a cry, high-pitched, pained, desperate. She didn't keep me safe. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the forest. The child was closer now, only a few feet from the car. His eyes were wide and dark, reflecting the light like glass. Rain poured down his face, but he didn't wipe it away. He didn't shiver. He didn't look human anymore. He took a slow, dragging step toward the passenger side. I didn't think. I threw the door open and ran into the storm. Branches whipped my face. Mud clung to my boots, making each step heavier. I shoved through the brush, barely able to see the trail. The rain blurred everything, turning the world into a smear of gray motion. I heard footsteps behind me. Not heavy adult footsteps. Light ones. Soft. And quick. They splashed through the mud, chasing after me. I pushed harder. My lungs screamed. My chest burned. I didn't look back, not until I reached the clearing near the lake. I skidded to a stop, slipping on the wet ground. The lake churned under the storm, the surface violently breaking and reforming like something alive was beneath it. Lightning lit the water in blinding flashes. And standing at the edge was a woman, Elaine. Her hair was soaked, hanging in ropes around her face. Her clothes clung to her, drenched and muddy. She stood barefoot at the shoreline, staring into the water as if waiting for something to rise from it. Her hands hung limp at her sides. I couldn't see her expression clearly, but her posture was wrong. Too still. I approached slowly, shouting over the storm, "Elaine!" She didn't answer. I was 10 feet away when she spoke, barely audible through the wind. He kept calling. I froze. She turned to me, her eyes dull and unfocused. Shadows clung to her face in a way that the storm shouldn't have made possible. Dark hollows under her eyes, around her mouth, tracing her jaw. She tried to ignore him. She said, "Everyone did, but his voice never stops once it knows your name." She took one step closer, her wet feet sinking into the mud. "He calls for help, and if you answer, even once..." Her lips trembled. "He never lets go." I felt the breath leave my chest. Elaine lifted her hand and pointed past me. I turned. The child stood only a few feet behind me. Closer than ever. Close enough to touch. His skin was pale blue. Water dripped endlessly from his hair. His eyes were black wells reflecting the light without blinking. His chest rose and fell in uneven, jerking motions, as if breathing was something he remembered, not something he needed. He raised one hand, reaching for me. I stumbled back, my boots slipping in the mud. The boy spoke, his voice layered, one voice on top of another, like echoes trapped inside him. "You promised." "I never..." My voice cracked. The wind howled, the ground shook, the lake roared like something massive had moved beneath it. Elaine stepped backward toward the water. She whispered, "He wants to come home, and once he picks someone, he follows them everywhere." The boy took another step toward me, water pattering onto the mud from his soaked clothes. "You heard me. You answered." I kept backing up until my heel hit a root and I fell. Mud splashed up my arms and jacket. The boy loomed over me, small but impossibly heavy, like the air itself thickened around him. The storm seemed to quiet just enough for me to hear him breathe. "You're the one who hears me now." I scrambled backward on my hands, slipping and clawing at the ground. My heart pounded so violently I thought my ribs might crack. Leave me alone," I choked out. He shook his head slowly. "I can't." Elaine's voice cut through the storm, trembling, broken. "He won't stop. He never stops. He followed me. He followed the others. He'll follow you too." The boy's head turned sharply toward her, the movement sudden and unnatural. The storm rumbled with the sound of shifting thunder. Elaine backed toward the water, tears mixed with the rain on her face. She whispered, "I'm sorry." Before I could react, she stepped into the lake. The water swallowed her instantly, pulling her under with a force that didn't match her slow steps. She vanished beneath the churning surface like something had yanked her down. "Elaine!" I shouted, stumbling to my feet. The boy didn't move. He stood where he was, staring at me with empty eyes. "She broke her promise too," he said softly. Lightning exploded across the sky. The trees bent under the wind. The lake roared like something massive had moved beneath it. And slowly, so slow the movement barely registered, the boy smiled. Not wide, not cheerful, just a tiny curve of the lips, enough to freeze my blood. "I wait for you, even when you run." The ground trembled beneath my feet. The lake surged, waves slamming against the shore. The boy stepped closer, and the storm swallowed everything. The storm didn't ease, it swallowed the world, roaring in my ears as if the sky itself had cracked open. Rain hammered the ground so hard, it felt like the earth was shivering beneath me. The boy didn't chase me. Not yet. He simply stood there on the muddy shore, his small silhouette framed by the lightning that kept tearing jagged scars across the sky. But he was waiting. Waiting the way a predator waits for something to exhaust itself. A sudden gust of wind nearly threw me backward. I steadied myself, boots slipping in the mud as I took one slow step away from the shoreline. The lake raged behind the boy, swirling and churning like it wanted to climb from its depths and drag everything into it. Somewhere beneath that water, Elaine was gone, pulled under like she'd never existed. My voice felt trapped in my throat, thick and useless. I didn't dare turn away from him, but standing still felt like I was surrendering. The boy tilted his head, watching me with an intensity that made my stomach twist. "You can't leave," he said softly. Lightning cracked again, close enough that the air vibrated around me. I flinched, closing my eyes for just a heartbeat, and when I opened them, the boy was closer, still not running, still not lunging, just closer, as if the world had shrunk around him. My breath came fast and shallow. I forced myself to step back again, boots sinking into the wet soil. "I don't know you," I said, hating how small my voice sounded. "I never promised anything. He blinked, slow and mechanical. "You heard me," he said. "That's enough." His words pressed against me like invisible fingers wrapping around my lungs. I tried to force air in, but each breath felt tighter than the last. I turned and ran. Mud splashed behind me as I sprinted through the clearing, back toward the trail that cut through the forest. The trees blurred into long streaks of dark green and black. Branches slapped my arms and face, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. The storm screamed overhead, a living thing clawing at the sky. Every instinct told me the boy would appear beside me, would grab my ankle or my sleeve or my throat. Every crack of thunder sounded like a footstep behind me. Every gust of wind like a whisper brushing the back of my neck. I didn't look back. Looking back would slow me down. Looking back would mean seeing him much closer than he ever should be. I didn't stop running until my legs nearly buckled under me. The cabin came into view through sheets of rain, its windows flickering dimly like the lights inside were losing their fight. Relief surged for a moment. Stupid, temporary relief. Shelter meant nothing now, but my body wanted walls around it, a door I could lock, anything that felt remotely solid. I stumbled onto the porch, shoved the door open, and slammed it behind me. My chest heaved as I tried to breathe, clothes dripping onto the wooden floor. The interior felt colder, darker. The lamp in the corner flickered weakly, barely lighting the room. Something vibrated. A low, rhythmic rattling. The drawer where I'd stuffed the flip phone. I stared at it, heart thundering in my ears as the rattling grew louder. The entire table shook now, the old wood creaking under the force. It was as if the phone was trying to claw its way out. "No," I whispered, taking a step back. "Not again. Not again." The drawer burst open. The old flip phone launched onto the floor with a violent crack, bouncing once before landing face up. The screen lit up, despite the water dripping from it. A call was coming through. Calling. 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 No name, no number, just the endless loop of the word blinking over and over. I backed into the far wall, shaking, unable to take my eyes off the phone. The storm outside roared. The cabin lights flickered again, then steadied with a low hum. The phone stopped buzzing. The screen went dark. Silence pressed in, or what counted as silence under the storm's constant rumble. My ears rang as I waited for something else. Another ring, another message, another voice. But nothing happened. The stillness felt worse. I forced myself to move toward the phone. My body felt heavy, each step like walking through water. When I reached it, I crouched slowly, hand trembling as I reached for the device. The moment my fingertip touched it, the screen lit up again. A message appeared. "He's here." My throat tightened. Another message. "Don't turn around." I froze. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to move, to breathe, but I couldn't. My fingers went numb. The air behind me felt colder, heavier, like the entire room had shifted. The phone buzzed again, longer, harder. A new message. "He likes when you run." My pulse hammered so violently I felt it in my teeth. Slowly, far too slowly, I forced myself to exhale. I didn't dare turn around. I focused on the phone, on the faint blue glow of the outdated screen. Another message. "He followed you back. You can't leave him outside." The cabin behind me creaked. One long, slow groan of wood, bending under weight. Not storm weight. Something inside. I squeezed my eyes shut. The phone buzzed again. Longer. Harder. A new message. "He wants you to turn around." My breaths came in short, sharp bursts now.
I could hear something dripping behind me. Slow drops, hitting the wooden floor. Water maybe? Or mud? Or both. My stomach clenched so hard it hurt.
Another message. He's smiling. I swallowed hard. My hand shook so badly the phone slipped from my fingers and clattered to the floor, the plastic casing cracking. The sound echoed through the cabin. Behind me, the dripping stopped. The floorboards creaked. One step, then another. Soft, bare feet on the wood. My vision blurred with panic. I pressed my hands against the floor, pushing myself forward. I didn't turn around. I wouldn't, but I crawled toward the hallway, dragging myself like a wounded animal. The lights flickered overhead. The creaking grew louder. He was following. I scrambled to my feet and sprinted toward the bedroom at the end of the hall. I slammed the door shut and shoved the dresser against it, heart racing so fast it made me dizzy. The storm pounded outside. The wind howled through the trees, but the sound that terrified me the most came from inches away. Soft knocking. Not angry, not loud, just gentle tapping, like a child asking to come in. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. I backed away from the door until my spine hit the opposite wall. "Go away," I whispered, barely able to speak. "Please go away." The knocking stopped. Silence. Then, "You left me." The voice seeped through the cracks around the doorframe. Cold, wet, echoing. It crawled into the room like fog. "You ran from me." The lights flickered violently, buzzing like electricity was dying inside the walls. "You promised you wouldn't leave again." I shook my head, tears streaking down my face. "I never said that. I don't know you." "Yes," the voice whispered. "You do." Wood splintered. The top corner of the door cracked inward, as if pressure was being applied from the outside. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The dresser shuddered as something pushed against it. "You hear me. You always hear me." The storm roared above the cabin, shaking the roof. The walls trembled. The floor vibrated beneath me. Every sound mixed into one overwhelming roar. Then, a new sound cut through everything. A car horn. Short, sharp, repeated. I froze. That sound didn't belong in the storm. It belonged to my car. Someone was out there. The voice outside the door went silent. Another horn blast. And another. I didn't wait. I shoved the dresser aside, ignoring the splintering noises protesting behind me, and yanked the door open. The hallway was dark, darker than before. The only light came from the open front door, swinging wildly in the wind. I ran toward it. The storm hit me with full force the moment I stepped outside. Rain stung my skin like needles. The wind shoved against me like a wall. A pair of headlights cut through the darkness. A truck. Huge, old, rusted. And in the driver's seat, waving frantically, was the sheriff I'd met earlier. "Get in!" he shouted over the storm. "Now!" I didn't think. I sprinted toward the truck, slipping twice before catching myself. I grabbed the door handle and hauled myself inside, slamming it shut behind me.
The sheriff floored the gas before I even had my seatbelt on. The truck lurched forward, tires spinning in mud before catching hold. We tore down the dirt road as branches snapped against the sides, scraping long lines into the metal. My breath came in ragged gulps. I looked back through the rear window. The cabin was shrinking behind us, but something stood on the porch, a small silhouette, still still, watching. "Don't look at him," the sheriff said, voice trembling despite his effort to stay steady. "Don't ever look at him." "What is he?" I choked out. "Why is he following me?" The sheriff didn't answer right away. The truck bounced violently over a dip in the road, nearly lifting off the ground. Finally, he spoke. He drowned 40 years ago. Went missing for 3 days before they found him in the lake. After that, he shook his head. People started hearing him. First, the ones who found the body, then the ones who lived near the water. He calls for help. And if you respond, if you acknowledge him, he attaches. The sheriff's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. He latched onto me once. I got rid of him. Cost me half my damn life. But he's stronger now. I stared at him. "You got rid of him? How?" The sheriff swallowed hard. "You don't really. You pass him on." My stomach twisted. Pass him on? How? By letting someone else hear him. Someone who answers. My blood ran cold. The sheriff didn't have to say it. I understood. That's why he looked terrified when I walked into his station earlier, why he didn't want to tell me anything. He heard the boy once, then he passed him to someone else. "Sheriff," my voice cracked. "You knew he'd come for me." The sheriff didn't look at me. "I didn't bring him to you. He found you on his own." The truck swerved around a sharp bend, the engine groaning. Lightning flashed, and for just a second, the figure of the boy was standing in the middle of the road. The sheriff cursed and jerked the wheel. The truck veered, slammed through a fence, and skidded violently down an embankment. We crashed through brush and mud before the truck slammed to a halt against a tree. The airbags exploded into my face. My ears rang. The world spun sideways. Rain poured in through the cracked windshield. When I lifted my head, dazed, the sheriff was slumped over the wheel, groaning but alive. Outside, the storm roared louder than ever, and through the shattered glass, I saw him, the boy, standing inches from the hood of the truck. His skin glistened with lake water. His eyes were black holes, and when he lifted his head to look at me, his lips formed the same horrible, fragile smile as before. "You tried to leave again." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. He reached one small hand toward me, water dripping from his fingers. "It's your turn to keep me." I scrambled backward, slamming into the door, trying desperately to get out, but the handle jammed. My palms slipped on wet metal, my lungs squeezed tight. The sheriff stirred beside me. The boy didn't look at him. He looked only at me. Lightning flashed, so bright the world went white. And then everything went silent. The storm, the wind, the rain, all of it gone. Just silence. I blinked. The truck was gone. The forest was gone. The sheriff was gone. I was standing in water. Cold, dark water up to my knees. The lake. Fog curled in every direction, thick and suffocating. I couldn't see the shore. I couldn't see anything except the still surface stretching endlessly around me. Something moved beneath the water, just a shadow at first. Then another, and another. Small hands broke the surface. Not one pair, dozens. Tiny fingers reaching upward, pale, blue-tinted, barely visible under the fog. Voices rose around me, childlike, layered, overlapping. "You heard us. You promised. You said you'd stay. You won't leave. Not anymore.
Cold hands closed around my ankles, pulling gently at first, then harder, tightening with every passing second. I screamed and tried to yank my legs free, but the grip was too strong. More hands rose from the water, grabbing my knees, my thighs, my waist. I thrashed wildly, heart exploding in my chest. The water surged upward. I was sinking. The fog swirled above me as my body was dragged down. The surface grew farther away, pale and trembling. My lungs burned. Panic turned the edges of my vision white. And then, a small face appeared in front of me underwater. The boy. His eyes opened slowly, and he smiled. "You hear all of us now." The lake swallowed me whole. Darkness. Silence. Then a faint sound. A ring. A buzzing, muffled ring. The flip phone's ringtone. Somewhere above the water, somewhere on the shore, somewhere waiting for someone else to hear it, waiting for the next person to answer. And the boy's voice echoed through the depths. "I'll find you, and you'll help me call them all." Darkness closed in, and the lake kept me forever.